Good morning, good morning, good morning. So I've made my way around the room, kind of introduced myself to those that we haven't met. Just for my own point of reference, where you are, if you have had one closing, raise your hand. Okay, all right. So the rest of you have not had a closing. All right. Has anybody sold real estate in another area before? No? You have? Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. So the purpose of today's training right now for new members is we want to get you on the path to professionalism. Not only are you a realtor, you're not a realtor, you're a realtor. Lesson number 1, it's 2 syllables, realtor. When somebody calls you a realtor, you can just say, yes, I'm a realtor. All right. That's just a little blurb there. All right. So everybody has their purchase contract, right? So this contract, the timeline of this contract follows the timeline of a real estate transaction. All right? So first of all, I'm going to go through the contract, and if we have time, I will do a modeling of how I would present this contract to a client. All right? So let's get started. The first thing that I want to bring to your attention is line number 4. This is a legally binding contract. So when you're with a client, you're not just, making a casual offer. If this offer is accepted, it's a legally binding contract. So I highlighted that because when you're talking to your client, whether it's the seller or the buyer, you want to tell them this is a legally binding contract. When you sign and the other party signs, you are legally obligated to buy this property under these terms and conditions. And seller, you're legally obligated to sell it per these terms and conditions. The next thing that's important to note is calculating days and times. On line number 11, all days are calendar days. In our previous contract, they were business days, but that's not the case anymore. They're all calendar days. So when does the calendar day start? It's calculated midnight to midnight, beginning on the first day following acceptance day. So let's say that all parties sign today on the 20th. The 21st is day 1 of the calendar days. Make sense? If you have questions, stop me, okay? All right, the next section, lines 13 through 22, that's where you put your information in, the listing agent, your information. Put in your license number, especially as new agents. The closing attorneys need that number. And they're not going to have your number yet. So you put in your license number and your broker's license number. All right. The next part, we get to the property. We're telling whoever's seeing this contract, this property address here, then you're going to put in the deed book page number, block number if you have it, and the lot number and the sublot. Now, the first question is, where do I get that information? In the multiple listing. It is required that listing agents put in the deed book and the page number. If they have the lot number, they'll put the lot number in. Now, if you're a new agent, you may not know about the PVA site. That's a training for another day. But you're going to get a membership with the PVA, and you're going to get a subscription. So when you're getting ready to write an offer, hopefully if you have time, you're going to pull that PVA sheet. And if you look at it, you're going to notice that there is a block number on there sometimes. And there is just almost always a lot number. All right? So remember, we are realtors. We are professionals. This is a legally binding document. Who's going to see this? Both the buyer and the seller, the agents, the lender, the appraiser. All of those people are going to see this contract. So it's very important that we're very specific on our geographical description, not only the address, but the deed book and the page number, because that's where that attorney is going to send their title clerk to go do the research on that piece of property. Let me digress and tell you a little story. It's story time, okay? Do you like stories? Do you like stories? Yes. Okay, all right. We're going to have fun whether you want to or not. All right, so let me tell you a little story. Jessica Hausman and I, we do a lot of business together. We've been at this, I've been at this 12 years, she's been at it, 50 or 60. So we had this deal, and it was a house and 10 acres. And I had the buyer, and she had the seller. And we got it closed. Everybody's happy, happy, happy. 2 years later, my buyer calls me. Sarah, we were going to have that front 5 acres surveyed off, and we were going to build a house there, and we're going to sell the house on the back 5 acres. And I said, oh, okay, that's a good idea. Well, how can I help you? Well, the surveyor came, knocked on our door, and said, you don't own that front 5 acres. I said, what are you talking about? So what happened when, and we'll call that family the Smith family. When the Smith family bought that property from the Franklin family thought they were selling the house in 10 acres. The Franklin family bought it from the Brown family. The Brown family thought they were selling the house in 10 acres. What happened, the Brown family only conveyed the house in 5 acres. The screwy thing about the whole thing, the PVA was collecting taxes from every family on the house in 10 acres, but they didn't own the 10 acres. Here's what we did. Thank God nobody had died. We were able to get quitclaim deeds, get it remedied, get a deed of correction where the Smith family, in fact, owned the house in 10 acres that their lender had lended on, that they had been paying property taxes on, and Jessica and I worked through that. Our job doesn't stop at the closing table, and if you think it does, you're wrong. All right? Lesson number 1 on this purchase contract. If you're selling a house in 10 acres, by golly, you better write, I'm selling a house in 10 acres located at 123 Banana Street. And here is the PVA deed book and page number. You're going to go to the PVA and you're going to make sure that that PVA deed book and page number has the house in 10 acres on it. Well, guess what? We all did that, and the PVA was wrong. So the lesson here is give your title company enough information to make sure that they are transferring ownership of what the buyers say they are buying. And when you get to the closing table, take a peek at the deed. Look at the property description, especially if you're dealing with acreage. Make sure that that deed reflects that residence and that number of acres. But this is where that conversation starts, okay? And I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this because that's a real life story. All right, next. Pretty self-explanatory, lines 29 through 33 talk about what is expected to stay with the property at closing. I want to bring your attention to line 33, security system, then invisible fencing, associated transmitter, television mounts, and brackets. Those are gray areas, right? Because how many homes do you know that have a Simply Safe portable security system? They're very, very common. This is a talking point. If you're writing a contract for a buyer and that MLS says that there's a security system, you know, it's probably safe to assume that the seller is conveying that security system, but you might want to double check it. All right? On the invisible fence, if there's an invisible fence, you know, especially dealing with a seller, you want to say, Mr. Seller, by signing this, you're agreeing to leave that invisible fence and transmitter. Is that something you want to do? And if you don't want to do that, then you're going to mark through that, have your seller initial it, and present it with your counter offer. Had a closing, last week, I don't know. My buyers took possession after closing. We did a final walkthrough before, just like we're all supposed to do our final walkthroughs. Everything looked great. They moved into the house. They called me and they said, the seller took the television mount and left holes in the wall. Okay. So I text the other agent on the other side. I said, hey, the buyers walked in, the television mount's gone. It was agreed to stay in the contract because it's right here. It says they said they were going to leave it. My buyers were expecting it to be there. My next question was, did they fix the holes in the wall? Well, no, they didn't fix the holes in the wall because they wanted the buyers to know that's where you put the mount because it studs right there. Well, that's pretty thoughtful. So guess what? This could have gone a few different ways. I work for my client, right? I asked my buyer, I said, do you want me to ask them to bring that back? Because that's what they agreed to in the contract. And they said, no, they left some curtains in the house and, you know, it's okay. We're fine with it. Okay, thank you very much. But the point there is you work for your buyer. It's not like, well, I'm justifying that the seller took it, they didn't know. You work for that buyer. So you ask them, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to get that back for you? If you want me to get that back for you, I'll get it back for you. And if it's a problem, I'm going to go buy them one. Because my customers, my clients are going to be happy. Read this part right here. Make sure you go over it with your buyer and with your seller. Very important. The devil's in the details, kids. Okay, appliances, refrigerator, stove, range, dishwasher, microwave. How many houses have you seen that have a refrigerator in the basement or in the garage? Very common, right? So if you put on here, and this is a real pet peeve of mine, if you put on here, per the MLS, you can't do that. Guess what? I can change that MLS right now and take that refrigerator off. I can put it back on. I can put the washer and dryer off, take the washer and dryer off. You list out the refrigerator. So you're going to check refrigerator, stove, range, dishwasher, microwave. Maybe the washer and dryer staying. You're going to add that in right there. Maybe there's a deep freeze that you want. You're going to add that in right there. Maybe you want that refrigerator in the garage. You're going to say garage refrigerator. I have even seen where a house had multiple kitchens and the listing or the selling agent actually said the Whirlpool white refrigerator in the basement and the Samsung stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen. Be specific. You're a professional, this is your job. All right, next line. Seller shall remove the following fixtures prior to the delivery of possession. Example, maybe there is that old crappy refrigerator in the garage and you don't want it because you got your own crappy refrigerator that looks a little bit better than their crappy refrigerator, right? You're going to put in there, seller to remove the old refrigerator from the garage. Here's another one. We sell in rural areas, right? How many properties have you gone up to and there's just a bunch of junk? Maybe some old tires, some piles of scrap lumber, what have you. And your buyer's like, you know, I really don't want to clean their mess up. Right here, remove the old tires, remove the debris, remove the whatever. You're very upfront, you're very specific. We're setting the expectation. All right, fuel and propane tank. On the multiple listing system, we have a block that talks about the propane tank. When a listing agent lists a piece of property and there's propane, they're going to ask that seller, do you own the propane tank or is it rented? Right? Normal question to ask because you need to know that. Because if it's rented, they need to know where to get that gas, right? So maybe it's owned, maybe it's leased. There's a check box for you to select if it's owned or leased. Shall it remain or shall it not remain? Maybe there's a propane tank there just for a little gas fireplace, and that seller wants to take their little propane tank with them. You might say, we want that to stay. All right? Any questions on that so far?
I just want to mention something. I had a deal that...
Speak up just a little bit, Miss Jenny.
Not too long ago, like a week ago, I had a closing, and lenders are very particular on that number 35 line item. You cannot list any personal property, like play sets.
Excellent.
Hot tubs, things like that, and you want an addendum.
Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up because that's a real thing. So let's say that in the listing, the buyer says the play set to convey and the storage building to convey and the hot tub to convey. Well, we want them, right? Your buyer wants them. The proper thing is not to put them here because they are considered personal property. And by virtue of being personal property, they have a value. So what happens when a lender sees that, they look at it, the underwriter looks at it, and then all of a sudden the underwriter gets all Twitter-pated because they think they're loaning money on some personal property that artificially may inflate the value of the home. So there's a couple of ways to remedy that. The first thing is to not put it on here. If you have a question about whether it should be on there or not, there's an addendum, because we're adding to the contract. There's an addendum that you can put to the contract that says play set, storage building, hot tub shall convey with the property. All parties sign it. Becomes part of the contract. However, the underwriter doesn't see that. Any questions about that? If you have a question whether or not to put it on here, check with your broker. even if it says MLS on the, even if it said hot tub on your MLS, it's still smart to put it in the contract because the seller may say, oh, well, they didn't ask for that, so I'm just going to sell it. And your buyer shows up and, oh my gosh, the hot tub is gone. Well, we got a problem. All right, can you kind of follow what we're doing here? It's making sense? Okay.
I have a question.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so on the MLS where you say you're selling a duplex,
Yes,
and so each duplex is what I'll say unit 1, unit 2.
yes,
And under the amenities, you write dishwasher, refrigerator, stove, washer, dryer, hookup.
mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean you have to leave the washer dryer.
Nope, because you're going to list those appliances in the appliance section,
Okay.
and the hookup is just that set of interior features.
What about microwave? Because you don't ever, I didn't list microwave.
Yeah.
On the amenities.
So on occasion, you will find a listing that the listing agent or whoever input their listing mistakenly checked microwave. And there's either not a microwave, or they thought there was one above the stove when it's really a freestanding $50 microwave from the Walmart, not a big deal. But if there's a question about it, always go back to that listing agent and say, you know what, I think I saw a microwave, but before I put this on here, I just want to make sure, because if that detail is important to your client,
Yeah.
you need to have it on there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. But if you don't put microwave on your MLS then.
If you don't put it on the MLS, that doesn't mean that it can't be on here.
Right.
Because I have seen many, many offers where the buyer's asking for the washer and dryer to remain, but they're not listed with the MLS appliances.
So they're going to put that on an addendum?
Nope, they are not. Washer and dryers are appliances. They don't have, even though, my gosh, my washer and dryer was probably a couple $1,000s, they're not considered like a play set or a hot tub or anything else. Now, if it was a deep freeze, you could put that on there. Those are appliances that it is traditional for them to stay, or traditional to be asked for. Would you say, Cindy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions about appliances? Nope. Okay. All right.
Wait, Sarah,
Yeah.
we feel like, so we've got this addendum with the play set and the hot tub and the
Yes.
Florida building. That addendum does not go to the lender, guys.
No, it does not. That's
Do
an.
not send that with your contract to your lender, because that's no different than you writing it on your contract here, okay? So just keep that in mind. When those personal items are attached to a sales contract, it's on that addendum and it stays in your folder. It is not to be shared with your lender, okay?
But just for personal property, like if it was a price change, you would obviously send that to your renter.
If you are renegotiating purchase price, yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Okay. And if you have a doubt, you ask your broker or you ask your mentor. If you guys don't know, Cindy Hart is the principal broker at Fernleaf Real Estate. She's been in real estate for how long?
18 years.
18 years. If you have questions about property management, Cindy does a lot of property management. She's awesome.
Wear many hats. We all do.
We all wear many hats.
When you're ready for it, that's what you do. You learn to wear many hats.
That's exactly right. Okay. All right. Now we'll get to the price and the terms. This is the part of the offer that everybody is looking at. So number one, line 41, purchase price. This is where you put the purchase price in. Number 42, the earnest money. Let's talk about earnest money. Do you guys understand what earnest money is? Back in the day, it was a good faith deposit. That is a financial demonstration to your buyer or to your client, to your seller client, of the financial strength of that borrower, of that buyer. So we're going to talk about multiple offer situations, and remind me to bring that up about earnest money, because I don't want to digress here. But earnest money is your client's, your buyer, because we're most likely dealing with buyers, is a demonstration to your seller. Yes, I can afford this. I have skin in the game. I want to talk to you about buying this home. Okay? And I'll talk about earnest money here in a minute. Let me just say this real quickly. I want you to think of earnest money, and this is what I tell my buyers. Think of earnest money as you're paying a little bit of your down payment at the time of your offer. That money is going to come back to you at the closing table and be applied towards your down payment or your closing costs or your purchases. purchase price, okay? All right, cash, line 43, payment of purchase price. All right, so you're telling me you're offering, say, $150,000 for this house. How are you going to pay for it? You're giving me, $500 in earnest money, which is not very much for a $150,000 house, but that's what you're giving me. And you tell me that, yeah, I'm going to pay cash for that. Perfect. My question to my buyer client is going to be, now, when you tell me you're going to pay the balance, that $149,500 in cash, is that money that you can write a check on right now? Well, no. Now, I'm going to sell some stocks, or my grandmother is giving me some money, or I'm taking a home equity line of credit. That's not cash you can write a check on right now. Now, some buyers may argue with you about they have it in their 401k and they have to get it. But here's the thing. In this contract, when we get a little deeper into it, you're going to understand that this buyer could be potentially committing fraud, and you a party to it, if you tell that seller that you're paying cash and you know they're not paying cash, that they've got to sell this house or they've got to get the stocks or the what have you. That is not cash. Cash is, I can write a check on it right now and you can take it to the bank and cash it. Is that clear? Okay, good. Now, line 45, how are we going to pay for it? Are we using an equity line? I just said home equity line of credit, most commonly called a HELOC. It could be a gift. It could be other, and that's where I would write in proceeds from sale of house. If my buyer's got a house and they're under contract and the money's coming from the sale, I'm going to write proceeds from sale of house. I'm going to be very transparent to this seller. This is where this money's coming from, because I'm not going to be a party to fraud. This is how I make my living, and I'm not going to lose my license over a misrepresentation on a house. And I hope you don't either.
Is that where you would also put, like you mentioned something about a buyer that's pulling from a 401k?
Absolutely.
You would also put that in the same place?
Yes. And then the next thing begins, proof of funds, right? So let's just digress here for a second and talk about proof of funds. You're going to have a pre-approval from a lender when you put with this offer. If it's cash, you're going to have either a letter from that person's banker or stock advisor, wealth advisor, that they have cash on deposit sufficient to purchase this property. The bank doesn't have to say, oh, they've got, $2.5 million in the bank. They just say they have cash on deposit sufficient to complete the property. Now, I have had buyers send me a snapshot of their account, and I'm like, okay, I see that, I verify that, and I delete that. I do not send that on. And then with my reputation with the seller's agent, I'm going to say, I have seen their account and I have seen that they have this money. Is that sufficient for you, or would you like me to get deeper into it and get something from the whoever, the lender, or the loan, not the loan, maybe the private banker. Okay? But if it's cash, it's cash. That's the biggest thing to remember. Financing. How are you going to finance? You're going to pay part of it in cash. You're going to finance the rest. You're either going to do a conventional, FHA, a fixed rate, adjustable rate, and then you have other. That's where you would write in VA loan, USDA loan. You might do bridge loan. That's where you would write something like that. Now, the next paragraph tells you, actually, this is where we're telling the seller how we're going to get this money. We are telling the seller that on line 48, we're going to get a loan amortized over blank years with interest rate not to exceed blank. If it's an adjustable rate, then adjustments are limited to the following. So if you were to leave these blank, you have just shot your seller or your buyer in the foot, because you've taken away a loophole for them to get out of this contract and protect that earnest money that they've worked really hard for, right? So 2 ways to get earnest money back. First way is by way of inspection not being satisfactory. Second way is they can't get the loan that they said they were going to get on the purchase contract. So do not leave those blank. There may be a time where it's a really unusual situation and the buyer says, well, maybe they're a very well qualified buyer and they have options and they just don't know what they're going to do yet. but they're doing some creative financing, whatever. I think in my history, I've written that one time, and that's TBD, to be determined. Because my buyer was confident they were going to close, they didn't need that loophole. All right? So, the next important thing on this section is line 53. Buyer must apply for said loan within blank days. Then it goes on to say, failure to apply for the loan shall constitute a breach of this contract. All right? And it's up to the seller if they want to give them more time to apply for the loan. Or guess what? They could void the contract and keep that earnest money. So your job as the realtor is to make sure that your buyer stays on task. Have they completed that loan application? Have they gotten all of their documents to the lender? What if they meet with the lender and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're going to go VA now. But we told them on the contract we were going with conventional. But something changed and a VA loan is better. Well, what does the contract say you can do? The contract says, the seller shall be informed of the progress of the loan, including any change to above financing terms or selected lender. And it also says any change in financing terms or lender must not adversely affect seller's proceeds or the closing date. I normally put 7 days in there. I work with pre-approved buyers almost all the time. On occasion, I might have a pre-qual. But when we're writing our offer, I'm going to tell them, we're telling the seller we're fully applying in 7 days, and I need you to do this, because if you don't, seller can void this contract, keep your earnest money. You want to buy the house, don't you? Okay, well, let's get this going. If you know your buyer's going to be out of town or there's some issues and 7 days is not enough, put 10 days, put 14 days. Give them enough time to complete their loan application process. Any questions about that? Yes?
Naturally, the best practice is to be pre-approved.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Mm-hmm.
But in this market, still sometimes you gotta be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So if my clients they found the perfect house,
Mm-hmm.
they're ready to pull the trigger, and they're not pre-approved, I'm gonna put in that contract, give them 3 days so they can get all their paperwork done and get the pre-approval sent in to the other realtor. Does that not hurt?
It doesn't help them.
It does not help.
It doesn't help them. So
That's
here's what I'm going to tell you to do. You're going to get a lender that you have a great working relationship with. And I guarantee you could reach out to Stockton and you get your buyer hooked up with them on a Friday afternoon and they'll get them pre-approved.
Okay.
And if they tell you they're pre-approved, because remember, pre-approved, I've seen all your financial documents, pre-qualified, I haven't, I'm just going based on what you tell me. If you can get them pre-approved, then you can negotiate hard for that buyer because you have confidence that Stockton said, oh yeah, they can get the money.
Okay.
So always have a a lender, have a good relationship with 1 or 2 lenders that you have their cell phone number and you can call them when you're out showing property on the weekend. Now, if you call them and you get the pre-approval, you need to reciprocate. You need to send them business and you need to appreciate them because they're, most lenders, not all, but some lenders work on a commission basis. Stockton, they all work on commission. If they don't close the loan, they don't get paid, and they've just given your buyer, an hour of their time, and then they end up going somewhere else. You can't control that, but have a good relationship with the lender. That way, when you're getting ready to negotiate hard for your buyer, you can do so with confidence.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. All right, so we've covered the first page. What time is it? 10:14. Okay, putting it in high gear. Okay, closing cost. At the top of page 2, again, you're going to put the address, you're going to put the lender contact. Lender contact's going to include their email address, name, and their cell phone number or their office phone number. If your buyer is asking for closing costs, this is where you put it. Now you have options. You can say, nope, we're not asking for any closing costs, so we're going to check none. We can say, yep, we need up to blank dollars, or you can do the next line, a percentage. I can tell you as a listing agent, I don't want to see a percentage. I want to see the dollar amount. And the reason I want to see a dollar amount is because I'm going to present this to my seller with a seller net sheet. And I want a firm number. So if I get an offer and it has a percentage, I'm probably going to calculate the percentage and we're going to counter back with that number in closing cost. All right? So if you, any questions about that? Closing costs can be very confusing. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to get too much into that. All right? That's a discussion for another day. Okay, now line 68 through 70. This is a talking point in your contract to tell the seller, if you're working with the seller, that, hey, there may be some fees that you have to pay because it's a VA, FHA, or USDA loan, and we're just telling you this up front. All right? And then very, very importantly, line 69 and 70, it says, except for earnest money deposit, all monies necessary to close shall be tendered at closing by certified funds. Oh my gosh, I hate to get to a closing and the buyers have to pick up and leave and go to their bank across town to get a certified check because their realtor or their lender did not tell them it had to be certified funds. Any questions? Don't be that agent.
That's a common mistake for newbies, guys. but
Very
just
common.
Always remember to tell them we have to have certified funds.
The cashier's check.
Is certified funds.
It doesn't matter if it's a bank or CVS or wherever you can get it.
Most of the time, those cash to close are not going to be dollars that you're going to get at CVS because we're probably talking about thousands of dollars. But yes, a certified check. They don't want money orders. Certified check, because if they show up with the money order, that title company or that attorney may say, no, we don't take those.
Well, and money orders only go up to 1,000.
Well, there's a good reason.
People know that.
I didn't know that, thank you. Money orders only go up to 1,000.
People would break out their personal checkbook and say, well, I certified this check. Make sure they don't do that.
Yeah, and it's embarrassing for them. So just, let's not go there, all right? All right, now, remember when I talked about if it's cash and it's really not cash? On line 72-3, right in here it says, the buyer represents that the information provided above related to any source of funds and or buyer's ability to pay cash is true, accurate, and complete to the best of buyer's knowledge. The buyer shall indemnify and hold harmless all foregoing properties from any liabilities, damage, costs, fees, and expenses, including attorney fees, resulting from any fraudulent information provided herein or any other writing provided by buyer. People, we're talking about money. It's not a taboo question when you're with a seller to say, what is the balance on your mortgage? That's not taboo. You need to know that. It's not taboo to ask that buyer. Now, let me make sure, just so I'm clear. It's one of my favorite sayings, rip it off. Just so I'm clear. You're telling me that I could take this check to the bank and I could cash it right now because the cash is in your checking account. Is that true? Well, no. It's okay. You've got to ask the questions. Because if you don't, and it's not cash, you could be in trouble. Don't be that person. All right, escrow money, love it, love it. So as a buyer's agent, naturally, you want to hold that earnest money in your escrow account, and that money is brought back to the buyer at the closing table to go towards their purchase price, their down payment, their closing cost, whatever. What happens to the earnest money? That earnest money goes into the account and it can come out with three different things. The first one is specific performance. Remember that from class? Hello? Yes? If you don't, say so. Specific performance is a legal term that says you've signed this contract, and if you don't do it, you can be sued to perform on that contract. It's a specific performance that you said you would do, and if you're not going to do it, we could sue you on that. All right? So specific performance is the first way. Specific performance is another fancy word for closing. So at closing, it comes back. Second way, mutual release of the parties. Does this sound familiar from real estate school? Mutual release of the parties. It's a bilateral contract. Both parties sign agreeing to. Both parties have to sign agreeing to release. When they agree to release, that earnest money discussion, they have to decide who's going to get it. Let's say that they don't decide. Seller thinks he gets it, buyer thinks he gets it, and we're not signing off. There's a whole procedure for that. You don't have to know that today. Your broker knows the procedure.